fourth discussion regarding this research methodology, Islamic perspective. And we have discussed on the first discussion of problem statement, research question, just to give an overview. And then on the second lecture, second discussion, example of research proposal we've gone through. And then on the third discussion or lectures, we'll talk about research design, strategy, sample design, data collection design, and so on. Perhaps this what we call fourth discussion, we try to focus a little bit on data analysis. Example of the PhD thesis we have put forward last discussion. We talk of qualitative and quantitative analysis, and also we try to somebody suggests that we should go through the previous lectures, especially on data collection and data sampling, to highlight certain issues. Okay, today we'll take half of the time to discuss about the previous lectures, little bit detail, and then we will talk about today on the qualitative analysis and quantitative analysis. And of course, on the fifth lecture, we're expecting to do some data analysis as well, extension of this, because data analysis is quite substantial. And then we could extend on the next discussion, and perhaps discussion 6 and 7, we would talk about research finding, example, contribution to knowledge and industry. And the last lectures on discussion 8, we try to look into development of research thesis report at universities, industry, to have a critical ideas how it should be improved and so on, especially in the industry or perhaps also in the universities, to make friendly to the student or to the researcher or searcher. They should have a clear, we call it SOP or guidelines based. Do not emphasis too much on technical aspect. Just should be based on the structure and what are the substance in the research. Should give the emphasis, because Islamic perspective is slightly different than that of normal conventional research, whereby we have our own strategy of maqasid al-Sharia. So perhaps discussion 8, we can have a discussion of all those what we have gone through, and perhaps what are ideas that could move forward to improve research methodology. Okay. Now, just to recall the last lectures last week, we gave an example of a PhD thesis. Perhaps in our lectures on the last lectures on the 8th lectures, we could concentrate on the proposal, how the structure that research report in the industry or in business world is slightly different than that of the academic. We have discussed on introduction, literature review, research methodologies, and perhaps today's discussion we could discuss on the data analysis and the results. Okay, and also today's discussion we try to review some of the important or refresh our ideas, some of the important topics that we have gone through the previous lectures, because all this data analysis and result interrelated with what we have discussed. For those newcomers, they are not, they missed the previous lectures. Perhaps this will give them some ideas. Okay. We have discussed introduction, just to go through introduction of research, the background, the issues of problem statement. We should formulate a problem statement, and we should define our research objective and questions, and then outline our research, which include the scope, the scope of the research should be well defined, so that we're able to guide us to areas where within the scope. Okay, this is a scope, because scope and outline of research is very important because it determines areas. We should have a very big scope that we are unable to finish on time, and then we are not able to cover the areas, and it's important. And also it relates to the research method to choose for the scope and various research methods. For example, here we are talking about qualitative research. Why I put qualitative research? Because in the discussion, we're able to distinguish between qualitative research and quantitative research. And of course, in this case, we are talking about scope developing integrated model of strategic management. Okay, if you want to what you call to gain knowledge on strategic management, Maqasid al-Shayaa, there will be every Tuesday 5 o'clock. There is a special course on strategic management, you see, related to Maqasid al-Sharia, application of Maqasid al-Sharia in strategic management. Okay, it just got normal chapter 2 on literature review and so on. I discussed earlier yesterday, and research methodology we have discussed previous lectures, but perhaps we could refresh our ideas on this area. Okay, because someone suggested to me that we should discuss this area again, because within half an hour is too short to understand. But anyway, this lectures basically is to show you the way, and then you find your own way, right? So this, perhaps if you read books or you reach certain discussion, you'll be able to structure your mind on research methodology. So research, without research process, we have talked of research design last previous lectures. When we talk of research design, there is a design strategy. It's very important, design strategy, because in Islamic perspective, you can see we put Maqasid al-Sharia as an overriding strategy of any research that we're going to undertake. You see, fulfilling Maqasid al-Sharia, that is protection of religion, to recall life, intellect, and then the other one is offspring and wealth, which is offspring and wealth, okay? Okay, so these are 5 set of Maqasid al-Sharia objective we should put in mind, because our strategy, our overall strategy, will fulfill this Maqasid al-Sharia objective. Other sort of strategies, such as type of strategy, your purpose, time dimension, is basically a tactical strategy to achieve the overriding strategy here. It's very important in that case. And we talked of data collection last week. We talked of sample design. I will give emphasis on this. All this, if we have undertaking the data collection design, sample design, and formulating our strategy clearly, then we put a pilot test to see or to refine further our strategy, data collection, and sample design. Okay, in our discussion last week, we have chosen the application of Maqasid al-Sharia integrated into strategic framework model. Okay, here, just to give you an example, how qualitative research and quantitative research could be applied in this case. So in this case, we have chosen a mixed research, research method to fulfill our research objective and the scope of our research, which we have discussed earlier in previous lectures. And here we are putting Maqasid al-Sharia. Since Maqasid al-Sharia is our overriding objective in whatever we do in life, even in application of research, undertaking of research. So it is, we put it overriding objective, because all other tactical research or strategy, we call it other strategy, functional strategy, or what we call is what I call it functional strategy. The other one is functional and other sort of strategy coming as a technical strategy in the value chain here to fulfill our corporate strategy. So here it's the same as in market in research we're trying to do. We put Maqasid al-Sharia here as overriding strategy, and we put as a qualitative research to find out technically or statistically the test of hypothesis to fulfill this Maqasid al-Sharia. So here we try to, since Maqasid al-Sharia is something new in this form of strategy, in this form, this proposed example case study, we try to assess the perception of managers and scholars, Islamic scholars, Sharia scholars, to what extent they understand management and strategic management, to what extent. So once we're able to understand their perception of this, we're able to formulate a proper, what do you call it, our next strategic tactical strategy in terms of evaluating whether this model could be applicable. Okay. So as we have discussed earlier, there are qualitative research and quantitative research. The most important element on the second stage is sampling design. After we have done what I call this research strategy on this part, the second stage perhaps we could look into sampling design, because sampling design will determine what kind of research technique we're going to use, so that we'll be able to design a proper questionnaire to collect data at this second stage here. Is it too small? Is it too small? You can see here, bigger. You can see here is sampling design, yeah, design, and then there is data collection design. In this case, we are talking about two research technique, that is qualitative research and quantitative research. I will try to explain the quantitative research what we have discussed earlier. Okay, in terms of quantitative research, you can see that the sampling design is different than that of qualitative research. I will try to explain now. Okay, in terms of qualitative research, the information we try to gather is basically from text data. I mean, there are various types of research method in qualitative, but in this case, I choose content analysis, which I believe is much representative. It's now developed into the area of opinion survey. If we look at opinion survey, we try to assess the opinions of our, what do you call it, subject matters, the opinion of people, for example, what they're thinking about certain issues. Normally, in common survey, we do a scaling method, saying that, what do you think, very good, not so good, and so on and so on, geared to what we want them to answer, but in different scale. But in this content analysis, it is the text they write, or the text from the speech they give, or the text from opinion is open, what we call open opinion. For example, Maqasid al-Sharia is strategic management. We just ask them, what do you understand by Sharia? What do you understand Maqasid al-Sharia? Give them an answer. So from the discussion, we try to summarize in certain form, and then we assess their thinking and their mind. So it's basically, I think it's more representative in that case to evaluate the mind of a person. So we try to look into it. And the other aspect, when we talk of quantitative analysis on the aspect, especially to assess the people, the mind, the pattern of the thinking. There are two basic methods using thematic analysis and content analysis. Why we choose content analysis? The content analysis now try to develop towards quantifying the text. It's quite interesting. You can even develop a frequency table, matrix table that you're able to design a certain pattern. In case of thematic analysis, it is just subjective opinion. You just can do some network understanding, pattern of thinking. That's all. You cannot. Difficult for you to quantify the thinking near towards quantitative analysis. So the development here is quantitative content analysis get toward this, and perhaps these are the areas of development we look into as far as method is concerned, methodology is concerned. In terms of sampling design, as far when we talk of quantitative analysis, there are commonly could be divided into two methods. Firstly, which is scientific sampling method, we call it probability sampling, and the other side is non-probability sampling. When we talk of probability sampling, it's commonly scientific in nature, which means the word randomness. Randomness means that every same opportunity of the subject matter could be selected to represent the population. That is why it is scientific. In case of non-probability, the selection or sampling is mere based on judgment. It's judgment and quota. There's just no proper randomness of selection. Okay, go back to probability sampling. Probability sampling basically divided into two: simple random. Simple random when you want to choose, for example, student in the class, you could just number them and put the numbers in the bottle and then they're selected. It's a very basic. And you have a random table, you have random submission to generate randomness. And these are very simple ideas for you to understand the basic principle of randomness. Means everybody is given the opportunity to be selected and equal opportunity. And the selection is random, not based on judgment and so on. Yes. Hello. Yeah. The other aspect of randomness is a complex randomness in the sense that when actual situation is not as simple as what we have discussed. The randomness, for example, a collection of certain data, they could be divided into system or to be selected systematically using random principle, and they should be divided into cluster to ensure that everybody in the cluster is being being selected. The cluster means different type of people, and it be stratified into further age group and so on and so on. It just to give you an idea that you can read in the books much detailed discussion on systematic complex random survey and design, and it could be combined of these four, which are going to tell you how what we're doing for this our study on solid waste management. Okay, the other aspect of what we call that non-probability sampling is mere selection based on your judgment, based on your quota. For example, you want to have 40 people to be sampled to get the opinions or their minds regarding certain issues. You could divide into quota. male and female. You need 10 female, 10 male. And you could further divide it into age, for example. So these are based on your judgment, and you select without any form of randomness. You can just ask anybody on the street, for example, as long as you reach 20 people, reaching your quota, enough in that sense. So these are the non-scientific, but it is widely used in business, because in business, basically they want to study the people's perception toward their product, people preference toward their brand, people preference toward their certain product, the demand, and so on. So they want it very fast. So the quota simply is mere as indicator to present a certain group of people. So these are commonly used. You can see sometimes on the street, someone approach you to ask for your opinion. So these are basically, they don't do any randomness. They just stop anyone and start getting the ideas according to the quota. So this probability sampling basically used in scientific research, also in the social research, economic research. This is a commonly used probability sampling because they want to have a representative opinion of the population. Here is just an indicator of certain issue in business. So there's two things. Okay. Okay. Data collection, as you can see, there are very type method. I think you know about it. I mean, in the sense that measuring questions that you are talking about, communicating approach, you have to meet these people, or to interview them directly. Upon interview now you have a website as well to get into it, and so on. So these are communication approach. Communication approach where you communicate directly. And these are observation approach. Observation approach means personal, mechanical. What do you mean by mechanical? Today, the development of multimedia, you can get opinion, you can access opinion from the Facebook and so on, and from the article written and so on. Here you can see from record, physical, what they call the process and so on. Here that what I have mentioned earlier, that the content analysis is, I think, it's most easier to me and more representative to understand the personal behavior of persons, especially to, if you could access through Facebook, for example, and non-behavioral to record, to the textbook, to the journal written. These are non-behavioral, but it's based on record. Be able to assess in your mind the thinking what they write in the article, in journal, and in book. This is important as well. Yeah. Okay. This is a data collection. Okay. We talked last week. Data collection should be more structured in the sense that we discussed on the validity of the data, in terms of the data to valid internally or externally. We should collect in the structured way so that we're able to get able to, what do you call it, assess the validity of the data easier and systematically based on the questionnaire when we compile information. These are just an example to you. In case of the field survey, we did this. In case of markets, what do you call that? It's a market survey. It's a structure there. And of course, there are few instructions below this. This is an example. Okay. Based on the previous days, we have talked about qualitative. Now we talk about quantitative. Quantity. I was confused. Quantitative. Sorry. Quantitative is basically, for example, in this case, we are trying to assess the composition of rubbish This is most municipal solid waste generated from the residential area, the commercial area, and industrial area. The reason we try to collect this information, we try to get the right composition of rubbish being generated from these three areas so that we be able to design a proper recycle plan for this case. So you can see that we divide the sample into cluster areas: residential, commercial, and industry. Why we divide into this? Because we need to know whether there is a significant difference between rubbish generated from all these areas. Statistically, we're going to analyze that. And for the purpose of making this analysis is that we're able to design a recycle plan in accordance to the data generated here. In order to take a representative randomness of this data collected from these three areas, we divided the areas into residential area, commercial area, industrial area, and we tried to collect sample from each three lorries, meant to say each sample from three lorries coming into the landfill. And here, what we do, we put a systematic random sampling. We put when we structured the sample to be taken in such a way from these lorries, every three lorries coming to the area for the first three, we stop them, okay, and then we take 1 cubic meter of this sample randomly, and we analyze accordingly according to this structured, what they call that format. And you can see that this is information we need required, and this is a structure we're going to put into this structure. So here we can see that every area we structure clusterly, and then every rubbish is randomly selected in a sense. You see, that is called systematic random sampling. We put every three lorries. Before we decided to take every three lorries, we put an odd number: 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. So we select randomly what number appeared. 3 appeared, so 3 every 3 lorries. If it is 5 numbers, and every 5 lorries. So this is just a scientific way of selection. Okay. For the quota sampling market survey, it's simple. We just designed to make 5 people from each cities and so on, and we interview them, and then they put into the structure information. It's very simple, just to get data relating to price and demand. Okay, that's what we have discussed in earlier what do you call it? Earlier discussion. Perhaps anybody would like to ask a question, we can do so now before we proceed to data analysis. Why I refreshed previous lectures in this discussion, because someone asking me to refresh this. Okay. Any question they would like to put forward, please do so.
Okay, for the upfront.
Before we proceed to data analysis and result.
Go ahead, Brother Afrad, unmute yourself. Okay.
Assalamualaikum, Prof. Mashallah, thank you for the wonderful presentation. I'm becoming more interested to content analysis. Since last week, Qadarullah, I cannot attend this session. Is there any elaboration or step-by-step process for content analysis? Because we are the presentation is talking about qualitative and quantitative. Now, if I want to focus to the content analysis, is there any certain presentation that explain and elaborate about the content analysis steps, step by step. Thank you, Prof.
Okay, we will give you ideas step by step. After this, I will answer that question, data analysis and result. It is specifically telling you step by step how you should analyze text data from the content analysis technique. Yeah, that will answer your question in a few minutes. Okay, and perhaps when you have those idea, then you'll be able to read articles and books discussing on content analysis, much simpler to understand. Okay, thank you for the question. A few minutes I will answer that. Any other question?
I think we can proceed, Prof.
Okay, now we're talking data analysis. You see that data analysis is when talk of producing this PhD thesis. In this case, we are talking about qualitative research as well as quantity research. If you could recall the structure earlier in the chart, the two areas, qualitative, quantitative. So we discuss here on the qualitative research relating the issue of maqasid al-Sharia perception among the Islamic scholars as well as professional managers. In this case, we will answer our brothers who asked those questions. We try to go step by step here. Okay. And also, before that, we talk about later, after we discuss on qualitative analysis, we try to talk about quantitative analysis, basically on statistical analysis, financial analysis, which related to the sampling of field survey, which we have discussed earlier, especially on the composition of solid waste management, solid waste generated by the clusters of residential, industry, and commercial. In analysis text data by using content analysis. This is the first step. Okay, you text data collected from secondary or primary source. First, you have to collect data. How you to collect data? Collection of data means to say you have to collect, you have to choose. If it is secondary data, you have to choose a book relating to the subject matter. In this case, we choose a book written by what we call Sharia scholars and professional managers relating to maqasid al-Sharia and management. This is the text. I will tell you how to access text. And also we should, if we want to go further, in this case we go further, assessing text written by Islamic scholars, Sharia scholars, and professional managers. Journal relating to maqasid al-Sharia and strategic management. Try to get the text, try to understand that. And then, suppose that we have 50 journals here, for example, in this, and 50 books, try to select 10 randomly. So at least you have some, reduce your biasness in terms of selection. Okay. After you have selected those texts, you access their mind, or rather their perception on the issues that you are trying to study. In this case, we're trying to study the issue of their perception relating to maqasid al-Sharia and then strategic management in relation to what they're writing on the issue. So here, from there, be able to then what I call this meaning, what I call this here, I can't read my own right, identifying the meaning and condense the meaning into the formats which is written, which are given in earlier, to call it back, for example, this format here, This these are the format, for example, this format. You're written here, right? What is the gist of the discussion relating to the issue? I will tell you how to codify the issue of interest in this code. Okay. Okay. So after we have identified, okay, after we have transferred into that forms, okay, this is one example. Example from the meaning condensed text from book Kamali. This is a book written by Kamali about Maqasid al-Shayaa. We can take the gist of the thing, what they have written, the top objective of lawgiver and commonplace, which is why Muslim jurists normally they see here, they define Maqasid al-Sharia. And then you see, they're talking about Sharia. They're talking of Maqasid Sharia. They are talking of management or not, or strategic management. None of this book written by Kamali talk about this issue. So perhaps you identify Sharia as theoretical application. When you talk as, you can put further whether it's theoretical or application. If it's application, you can put a line there. And you talk about Maqasid Sharia, M. M is application. Then you put application. He's talking about application, not theoretical. So here you can make a conclusion that Kamali 2010 focus Maqasid al-Sharia only on application of Sharia, application. And then talk of in jurisdiction, in terms of application of Maqasid al-Sharia in Muslim jurists normally see that, is it, okay? And none of management and strategic management is being mentioned or relating to what he discussed. You see, so you will find here. You see, and this is the codifying how you could condense or identify the meaning, what you're trying to assess. Okay, this is if you talk of this, then you can further define the books. You can codify the whole thing there. You can draw a pattern of understanding and the frequency of Sharia as compared to professional discussing the issue of Sharia, Maqasid al-Sharia, management and strategic management. These are the four main subjects, the areas which of interest in your research, okay? And this is how you codify from the text, from the interview, from the journal, and so on. I'll give an example here later. Okay, just to give a summary, because the time is a factor, which is now we have 15 minutes. You can see, but perhaps this will give ideas for you. If you read books on this content analysis, you'll be able to understand the step taken as we mentioned earlier, and finally be able to understand how you could condense or identify a certain meaning, encoding a certain meaning, and according to your research interest. Okay, these are the outcome. You can see the outcome of the personal interview, which we did for Sharia scholars, among Sharia scholars, and professional managers. This personal interview resulted from this data is being analyzed from we can define certain method. This is a pattern, certain pattern from Sharia understanding, Maqasid al-Sharia understanding, and then management understanding, and then strategic management understanding. From here, we could draw a pattern. So you can use that. You can use it in your exam and so on, another form of pattern, because the study of qualitative, research is basically very subjective, but at this it will reach to a certain pattern of understanding toward certain direction in your mind. So from here, what we understand from Sharia scholars here, okay, and also professional scholars, the understanding of Sharia scholars, of course, focus much. I personally interview those Islamic scholars from the lectures given in the mosque and so on. So I see that most of them discuss when I access their lectures, and after the lectures, public lectures, I discuss with them. Their understanding is mostly on Sharia, but little understanding the application of Sharia. You see, when I ask them, what do you mean by Sharia? Due respect, they are unable to detail it's called Sharia, Makasil Sharia. So here, Makasil Sharia, I can see that when we talk of management, they have zero understanding what management is about, what strategic management is about. When we talk of basic management, meant to say basic management process, planning, organizing, leading, and control, they are able to explain, they are able to understand the basic thing. So this is what I understand from the Sharia scholars. But comparing to professional managers, they understand strategic management to a certain level, and on management much higher, and they do understand Sharia in the field in which, of course, they understand Sharia as a way of life, and then it could be applied in management and so on. They do understand. You see, okay. Perhaps the reason behind it is that this due respect is not. We cannot blame the Sharia scholars because they are what do you call it, the basic training does not expose themselves from other important areas, management, strategic management, and so on. They are being confined to Sharia. There's a dichotomy of knowledge, I'm trying to say. Sharia means worshipping to Allah. I mean, the category of worshipping, the rules relating to family laws, but in terms of management, relating to managing the families, managing the laws, and so on, it's not being discussed in relation to the management process. But in the case of professional managers, basically understand that certain process of work could be incorporated with Maqasid principle or Sharia principle. Here are the giving the examples of the, we call that, quantified opinion from Sharia scholars, authors from books and so on, which I have written, which I have discussed earlier, you can see here. But we need to go further into the books written. This earlier one is based on opinion. I mean, not opinion, interview the people, their mind, you see. But here we are talking about, we can assess from the book written by these scholars as well as managers, okay. We can see there are certain differences if you study. There are books talking about Sharia, written by scholars here, and also Maqasid al-Sharia is really widely being read. We have written the same as professional managers, written something on the strategic management, management, and Maqasid Sharia and Sharia. So there are two different patterns. For example, the knowledge of Sharia scholars do understand, but the level of understanding of management is less than that of the professional managers. And on top of strategic management to be applied in Sharia, they do not understand at all, because here, that is the reason, because they don't understand what is strategic management meant, so that they cannot see how it can be applied here. Okay. But in case of professional managers, they do understand Maqasid al-Sharia is a pattern of objective that could apply to management. Okay. So these are the other aspects from journal. But from the journal, the perception of people, from scholars and managers different. You can see that scholars, Islamic scholars from journal, they do understand the interest is toward management and strategic management. There are articles written. These are I think because there are scholars from universities, professors, and so on, the trend toward understanding of management, leading the application to Maqasid are there. Okay. So let us look into the totality of from the interview, books, and journal for Sharia scholars. It's quite interesting that interview, of course, from the interview, you can see not much understanding about Maqasid. These are the interview that normal graduate scholars. You can see, but from the books from scholars, university, they are towards this area, as well as journal, the trend toward application and management, and strategic management is much lesser because they don't understand. Okay, for the professional, it is quite normal. They do understand both sides from all the interviews book and so on. This is the pattern we derive from the Maqasid al-Sharia. Okay, from that interviews, we proceed further that since the trend of Maqasid al-Sharia being accepted or going toward accepting the perception to understand relating to management and strategic management. So here we try to develop model. First, we want to understand whether we could devise a business which conform to the Maqasid al-Sharia, and then it is viable to proceed on or not. That is the testing of the model. First, we need to determine qualitative, quantitative data relating to data collection from the from the field as well as from the market. To determine this is composition of data collected from our field survey. How much data, organic, residential, commercial, industrial, and average. You can see that three areas are being considered. The reason we want to see to test whether there are differences of composition of multiple solid waste in these areas, three areas. Okay, we will test this. If you look at the data, it's just simple way. Look at a 75%, but in terms of reality, whether this data composition from each respective cluster, is there any significant difference? The reason for being significant different, if not significant different, then we're able to design different forms of machine. If it is the same, then we could design or formulate a machine that could standardize to all this rubbish. Okay, look at this, for example. This is how we do. We collect the data using property system sampling, as I mentioned earlier, cluster, systematic. Each compactor is being collected 1 cubic meter of rubbish and then be analyzed into the form and then be into this format. And then we test statistical data because normally quantitative data is easy to test according to the standard statistical tests. Why I put it in the form of this basic statistical test? There are many areas or many software talking about SPSS and so on. But to understand the basic is very important for you to be able to interpret the outcome of the data. For example, if you choose chi-square test to see the difference, this is a common test, chi-square test, and ANOVA, which is called F ratio or analysis of variance test here. These are two common things. We make a test of these two. We found that it is not supportive in that level, 5% level, 1% level. But if we further analyze to 0.1%, what do you call that, level of confidentiality, confident, then we're able to, the difference is different. You can see from here, 0.01%. Show that if you look to the Journal of Statistician or method of analysis, many gave certain reservation on the use of chi-squares and this analysis of variance in term analysis, because sometimes the statistical analysis, the outcome will resulted in different decision making, different data. Therefore, if they see that we need to go further analysis. So here we did further analysis using t-test. to study all the differences within the cluster, and we found that it is not significant. It is supportive in that sense. So that's why important in statistical analysis we have to make a few tests to study to test the hypothesis or of the data collected, because it affect the result will affect, especially in business, it will affect your plan of action, in the sense that in this case the designing of the plan and so on. Okay, so after that we're able to design the plan for this, because all this, there's no significant difference. For the common plan, the recyclable plant, we can design a compost organic fertilizers production line. All these three, MSW, will go into waste separation center and go into turning it into composite organic fertilizer. Now we can see that many are going toward organic fertilizer and organic, what do you call it, organic plant and so on, and also plastic production line. Mean to say all the plastic is being separated and be recycled. You can see that in the market, recycled plastic product for other uses, and there are certain parts of this could be going toward pyrolysis power generation to power the plant. Yes, and of course there are other recovery items that could be sorted out and could be disposed as a sellable product. And these are the, you see, here we can see that it is in line with Maqasid al-Sharia, because we can see if we dump municipal solid waste right into the landfill, it becomes toxic and it is not environmental friendly in that sense, and it poses a lot of hazard to the resident as well as humankind. So here again, the reason for all this data collected is basically the aim is to test the application, perception of Maqasid al-Sharia, so be able to implement this sort of plan, taking into consideration of data from from the field and from the market, determine the viability of the business, I say. And of course, all this data collected is then being to be analyzed further into the cash flow analysis, and so making viable analysis to see the net present value and so on and so on. This three method is quite commonly used even in Islamic finance or Islamic banking to assess the viability of the project. So here we can see two elements. Now we can open for the discussion. Perhaps this research will be able to generate some new knowledge, contribute to development of new knowledge, and secondly to contribute in development of new industries. And that is the most important of any research, yes? Okay, thank you very much, and hope that any question, please do so, or any ideas.
Thank you so much, Prof. It's very interesting to see how we can implement theoretical into practical thing. Anyone, any question?
Or any ideas, perhaps?
Afra, you want to ask one more time, or?
Thank you, Dr. Shahkan. Prof, in the content analysis, I think the step is not all have been elaborated, or is it already elaborated?
Yes, it cannot be. I mean,
because you come from the textbook to another issue, I think.
Yes, you can. Sorry, because the time is limited to elaborate further this issue, for example here, okay, yeah, the step to be taken in analyzing text data by using content analysis, okay. These are the basic step, right? If you look into the book, it will detail out how you want to do, as what I have mentioned earlier in this case, okay. In case that, okay, step one, to be they don't tell you to be random, but I'm advocating some randomness here. For example, you're going to study 40 books, 10 books to study the content by using content analysis, 10 journals and so on. So you have 40 books as a sample, but you do a random sample taking 10 out of 40. Okay, here, choose. Same here, journal, in our case. Okay, from the 10 books or journal, you identify the meaning and condense it according to what you want to do. For example, step one, yeah, this one. You look at this book written by Kamali 2010, for example. From the book written on Maqasid al-Sharia, you're able to understand that Maqasid al-Sharia is only talking about an area of jurisdiction or area of Sharia. Nothing touch on the management and strategic management area of your interest here, because you're trying to see the areas of interest relating to the thinking toward management and strategic management. From this writing, all the book talking about Sharia, talking of Maqasid al-Sharia, okay? And you can further assess this Sharia, you identify using this code S, for example. S1 is theoretical. Some just talk of theory, okay? But in Kamali, talk of application. So you can put that, too important, the theory application, because application relate to the trend towards applying to other areas. Theoretical basically is theory confined to the area of discussion on Sharia or Maqasid. The same of Maqasid al-Sharia, you can assess the thinking through the books. You can access, you can put a note to the word they write relating to Maqasid, especially when they define Maqasid. Okay, here they talk Maqasid, but the Maqasid they talk application. They try to apply to which area they're trying to apply in terms of jurisdiction, legal. Nothing talking about Sharia. So you can't do that. So you can see that the aspect of discussion is this and this. You can assess. And you want to do further, making it to quantify. You can see in the discussion how many percent area of discussion on this Maqasid al-Sharia. 50%, 60%, or just a touch on few percent. I mean, the interest is very small, maybe 10%. That's why we can see here how many percent discussing on certain issue. You can quantify that. See? Yeah. Then the same. There's nothing to talk about on this area. You see? So important thing is you could gather the text data. This is called text data from the subject matter. This for you can put anything here in thinking of the application of Maqasid Sharia in terms of national development. Okay, or rather you put your subject matter is zakat. Whether zakat is only discuss this issue on the what do you call it? Receiver only, or an economic issue or social issue. You could identify your interest. You can identify it slowly here, and you can see the patterns. Content analysis basically is to see the pattern of mind of the scholars or your subject interest. Yes. Then you can proceed further. Yeah.
The Prof, we take from the Masinet, Mr. Kaba.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah. Prof, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm Ishmael Senekaba from the University of Labrador. I live in Labrador. First of all, trying to do a research on Ajin practice in can we do a comparative study such as the Ajin practice in Islam and Ajin practice in other faith? And if I'm doing this research, can I take quoting from hadith to know how personal hygiene or public health or practice in Islam? And my other question is about data analysis. I learned that they have a software program that can help you to analyze the data. Is that software, if it's important for us to use that software program, or we can do the data analysis manually? Because sometimes by doing interview or collecting questionnaire from the field, it have a lot of documentation that by doing it manually, maybe you do a mistake in it. And we would really love to have copy of this presentation because it will help the female that live in non-Muslim countries to be able to have a lot of research on it. It's like today research help boost our morale. We will have a lot of research in our country, so we get a lot of other people to follow. Say yes, this how Muslims is, while they are discussing about Islam is not the day, so just how Islam looks. Because we live in North Islamic country that mostly that most of it, if you talk about Ebola, they say, oh, that's a Muslim people have it in Liberia. That was the most of some Lord Muslim died due to Ebola. They say we play with water too much and we play with barley. So if we have a lot of research on those things, it will clear the dark. We cannot fight them with wars, but we can use our education to come up with some clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, sisters, for the good comment. First, I think you did make a bit of suggestion that we should have some sort of guideline, for you to refer to. Yes, that's what I understand. Perhaps Brother Shahan,
Yes.
Shahran will be able to quantify it, or rather to after the end of the lectures, we try to do some sort of note or refine back all the slide we have and put some note into it for the reference for others. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's important, I think what sisters mentioned is that in the world today, we are very defensive in the sense that even though we have all the goodness, all the better, wisdom in Quran and Sunnah, we are not, we are some sort of defensive to put forward that our system is the best. Because if you understand, basically the Maqasid al-Sharia, what I am interested in Maqasid al-Sharia. Maqasid al-Sharia basically is the objective of Islam. When I was a small kid, I used to ask my father, what is Islam means? What is we're supposed to do? For example, the bulb, I used to see the bulb can light us. But I don't have a very good answer until, fortunately, that I went to university in Shayaa. I'll be able to understand much of Maqasid al-Sharia in the real life, because I was asked to draw a speech to the one chief minister. So in order to do the speech international conference, I would try to understand in depth of Maqasid al-Sharia and its application. So in my process of running through Maqasid al-Sharia, basically the discussion is confined to jurisdiction, definition, theoretical definition, interpretation of Maqasid al-Sharia. Not much has been trying to apply that. Yeah, now there are many areas of trying to apply Maqasid al-Sharia in all activities, but we're still defensive. We do not put Maqasid al-Sharia as a forefront. We're trying to say activities A is in line with Maqasid al-Sharia. Basically, Maqasid al-Sharia is the overriding objective, mean to say whatever we want to do, future or currently, we should fulfill Maqasid al-Sharia. And Maqasid al-Sharia is meant for Rahmatil Alamin, is mercy to mankind. Protection of religion is for mankind. Protection of life is for mankind. Protection of intellectual is for mercy for mankind. Protection of offspring is for betterment of mankind, to avoid this homosexuality, lesbian, and so on in the society, and protection of wealth, resources. That is basically meant to stop from corrupting the wealth of a nation in terms of corruption, in terms of money, and so on. So basically, it is nothing bad in Maqasid al-Sharia, but we are still apologetic to put that as forward. So in this case, perhaps understanding this, we are able to put forward Maqasid al-Sharia in our research activities as well as our management activity. If you want to know, understand Maqasid al-Sharia application, strategic management, try to enroll in this course, strategic application of Maqasid al-Sharia in strategic management, every Tuesday, 5 o'clock. Brother Shahran will be able to give you some code how to access to this. Perhaps then we can marry the two, knowledge of research methodology into management. Okay, sister, that's a very good point that we could take note.
Inshallah, Prof. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think most of us are also in on Tuesday class. Any final word, Prof, for today?
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm sorry for being unable to go more detail because time is a factor, limitation of time, and we can see. But the most important thing is we are exposing to this area of research methodology, and in line with Maqasid al-Sharia, perhaps they will show us into the direction to understand more as we go along reading books, journal, discussion, and so on in our what we're doing today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. See you next Tuesday, inshallah.